Tobias Poensgen is a friend, and I think he's broadcasting this morning from the UK. And I'm going to have to ask him if he was on one of the boats at the Diamond Jubilee. I doubt it, but one never knows. That's me. You're close, so close. Except he has less hair than I do. So, again, the perspective of Europe, how it affects business here in the United States, is key. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Les.
So I have to ask you, were you on one of the boats attending the Diamond Jubilee?
I wasn't on one of the boats, but I was standing near Tower Bridge getting extremely wet because it wouldn't be a British event if there wasn't any rain involved.
Absolutely.
And I was also at the concert on Monday, and as well as on the parade yesterday. And I have to tell you one thing: if there are 250,000 people in front of Buckingham Palace shouting "Hip Hip Hooray," that's kind of a moving event that is really very rare. It was, at least for us on our little island, it was a very important days we've just had behind us.
You know, I heard a discussion over the weekend about the Queen, and the discussion was centered around branding the Queen, but she is the brand, and her brand has become increasingly more valuable over the last several years. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's actually very simple. Although I'm sure that Her Majesty would be very happy to be called a brand. Let's put it more in perspective of the fact that she is probably the best possible chairman of a company, doing her job in the best possible way to promote the brand that is the UK.
Right.
And you know, in a way, perhaps not dissimilar to the US, we are probably quite lucky to the extent that throughout our history, you know, there are very clear events that have happened that have shaped the country, including the fact that we've got a very recognizable flag, as you do in the USA. That makes branding a lot easier because, you know, most other flags are sort of relatively boring with three stripes.
Easy on the stripes. Easy on the stripes.
Easy on the stripes. No, I mean, you know, the Queen is really an example of somebody who has a much higher work rate and schedule than any politician you could find on the planet, you know, who serves with a single-minded purpose on, you know, serving her country and her people. And that's really made that brand into something quite special.
Well, she was just elevated, according to one poll, as one of the most popular women in the world, surpassing Oprah, which I found very interesting. And here she is in her Diamond Jubilee, and all of a sudden she's the most popular woman in the world.
Well, thank God for that.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, getting on to topic this morning, there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of controversy, stock market fluctuations based on what's happening in Europe.
Yep.
How has that impacted what you do in the venture capital, in the investment business? Is it affecting you, and how do you think it's affecting us? Okay.
Just for the benefit of your audience, I'm not sure how much you know about what I do. I'll just give you a brief rundown. I came out of industry originally, went into investment banking in the 1980s, started a private equity firm in 2002, which we've run for about 10 years, which is just about to be closed down. And I've been running a company called ScienceWorks Ventures PLC since last year, which is very much in line of I suppose, what you're discussing over there. We acquire and develop intellectual property from large corporates and academia, and also individual innovators, and we develop that intellectual property into valuable corporations. So essentially, we are kind of bridging the gap between innovation and capital. That large gap that exists between, that is partly bridged by angels, but we call us sort of a professional entrepreneur. Essentially, we seed fund our innovations and we take them forward. So we are very closely interlinked with the R&D industry, innovation in general, and the venture capital industry. And just sort of briefly to focus on that, because clearly it's something that's touching business everywhere, and certainly entrepreneurial startups. The venture capital industry, I should say, sadly but not unexpectedly, has moved further up the capital value chain. That means where many venture capital firms still speak about being early stage and trying to grow businesses from the very, very early stage. They've really had a very hard time making money in recent years, and therefore it's been not unexpected for them to invest in companies that are well beyond revenue generation. There is probably a slight exception in the general web and internet space, where you can create a lot more value with much less money, right? And you can see how the value develops, and you can invest according to certain milestones.
Yeah, the ratio is being given now is about 10 to 1. It takes 10% of the capital and 10% of the employees that it did 10 years ago to start an internet-driven company.
That may well be correct. And that's also why you have an intense focus of VCs in that sector. However, I don't want to say the real world, but in all the other sectors, anything that is innovation of products in clean tech, life sciences, med tech, pharmaceuticals, etc., there is still intense financial investment required, but the VCs, I don't want to say don't want to, but they can't really step up to the plate because they're not really making their exits. The IPO market isn't there as strong as it used to be. So they're struggling with their own problems, and this gap is partly filled by the angel investor community. But of course, you have the problem that angel investors aren't necessarily professional investors.
And that is one of the key issues. It was several years ago that, let's say in the late 90s, early 2000s, that venture capitalists would invest anywhere from $3 to $10 million, and angel investors were taking up the slack before. And now that's kind of changed, where angel investors here are in the $3 to $10 million range, and venture capital is like 10 million to 20 million and up. And the expected return on investment parameters have also changed, where angel used to be 7 years. Now they're looking for a 25% ROI in 3 to 5 years, which changes the landscape, and it changes the perspective of entrepreneurs as to how quickly a firm has to become more mature in order to be able to attract initial capital, $1 funding, and especially Series B and C funding.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, just because venture capitalists want something doesn't mean that they're going to get it.
Doesn't mean it's going to happen, right?
Nor, it doesn't change an entrepreneur's ability to develop his business faster. You can just do what you can do. As we know, as entrepreneurs, there are only 48 hours in a day. So that's really, this is a sort of a general problem that's happening in the industry, and I suppose we just have to drive through it. We at ScienceWorks are trying to make a little bit of a difference by being able to bridge those gaps, but we actually don't work with entrepreneurs either. We are effectively the entrepreneur. What we found, and this again is one of the problems in the venture capital industry, an entrepreneur who develops an idea, a concept, and starts driving it up isn't necessarily the best person, right? Very often they have what we call baby issues, which means they don't want to let go. They may have a lot of enthusiasm, but probably at times, they may not be the best people to develop a business. So, this is something that we're kind of eliminating. So we deal directly with R&D facilities, institutes, universities, and individual innovators who can come and, the innovators can come and work on a business as we develop it. But it is highly unlikely that they may actually become CEO of something just because they've invented something.
So we carry that forward every day. I would imagine that we're in someplace the area of 90 to 95% of the entrepreneurs I meet who submit a business plan will not long-term become the CEO or driving force of that entity. That's just the nature of the beast. And we all know about engineers, great engineers, but we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
And how has some of the European monetary issues, has it affected venture capital in Europe? Has it affected the growth and development of not just entrepreneurial companies, but more mature companies as well?
I have to say I'm not an economist, so what I say about economic development, do take that with a pinch of salt. I'm just another person with an opinion, and as you know, economists, well,
they are all opinionists as well.
Don't need to talk about that further. But it actually hasn't affected the industry. There is when I say we, I mean all us entrepreneurs and people in the venturing business have the advantage that it's actually everything is private. We're not really dependent on stock markets, and we get investment that is meant to realize in a number of years of time. Therefore, and this is something that is relatively popular with the large institutional investors, because they don't really have anywhere to put their money right now anyway. You can give it to the Germans, and by now you have to pay the Germans to give it back to you, because they are the only ones that seem to have good credit. And anything else isn't making the money. This is your pension money that's not earning any return. So the institutions will rather like to put it somewhere where the return is a few years hence. That's why we're seeing in all the fundraisings of private equity firms and venture capital firms, we are seeing increasing interest. So this is something where institutions put their money right now because there is a certain resistance to economic developments and inflation and various other factors that affect the return.
What about a key word that we run into all the time, and that's called risk? Here right now, biotech is on the upswing. There can be no doubt about that, but the risk involved in biotech development, in terms of the length of development time, the necessary regulations, certifications involved in medical and biotech, and then the commercialization phases extends out too long, versus an internet strategy which theoretically could be up and running within a matter of days. How is the tolerance for risk higher or lower than, let's say, it was 2 years ago?
I would say at this point in time in 2012, people are again taking on more risky developments than they were 2 years ago. I think concerns were higher before than they are now. And we have to distinguish between the types of investors that get involved in certain types of ventures, because it is relatively easy to understand what an internet venture is trying to achieve. Whether they actually achieve it is a completely different matter.
A different issue.
Is a completely different issue, you know. But the investors in anything that involves very sophisticated intellectual properties, such as life sciences, medtech, biotech, etc., nanotech, are typically extremely well-educated people who come out of that business, understand the commercial realities. And if you have phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials that you have to go through, they just take a certain amount of time, and the investors understand that, and there is substantial money available for that, because the payback can be enormous, and you can actually schedule the investment according to certain milestones. So, you know, that's I would say the risk appetite is probably greater than it was about 2 years ago.
Interesting. Yeah, we kind of do the same. Are you finding that business models, business plans are coming under increased scrutiny, or about the same amount of scrutiny as before, as to the commercialization and globalization of the product and or service?
I would say increased scrutiny, and this is not necessarily something to do with the fact that people want to be more critical. I think in essence, people are weighing their decisions much more. I don't want to say, you know, 2 years ago, many investors were sitting on their hands and they were using any excuse not to make an investment decision, because basically they were scared of putting their money somewhere and they didn't know where markets were going. This year it is better, even though the economic situation seems to be deteriorating again, but at least the underlying industry factors seem to be pointing upwards. Companies have amassed enormous amounts of cash on their balance sheets, are less bank dependent, and the general feeling is that, you know, we'll get through this irrespective of what happens.
And what do you think the timing is for getting through this?
You know, I haven't.
What's your opinion? I know you're not an economist.
I'd say this year will probably remain tough in every sense of the word, and we just have to get through this year. And it's not necessarily because the economy in general, the global economy, isn't working. I think it is actually working, but it is because of general confusion and fear of doing anything, you know, and unfortunately we come to realize that our governments are run by politicians and not experts. So
nor business people.
Nor business people, which, you know, well, you know, if you imagine, I don't know, would you like to have Donald Trump run the US?
Show of hands. Sure. Donald Trump running the US. Anybody?
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
nor would we like to have Richard Branson run the UK. You know?
Oh, so, no. But he's done a lot of great things. So
he has done a lot of great things, but we'd rather keep the Union Jack and not have Virgin on.
There you go.
Flag.
There you go. So, what I'd like to do, and if you ever change your seat, I can see by the little clock on the wall behind you that it's perfect. I can see where the time is on all this. Does anybody have any questions about Europe or economy or what's going on in Greece or anything. Not that Tobias is an economist, but he's a good businessman. He's got a good sense of what's going on. And it's different traveling from UK to Germany to Sweden to different parts because of not only the currency, but the cultural differences, some of the differences in philosophies. Is there anything that anybody would like to know? Somebody better say something. I can always count on Floyd.
Do I need a mic?
Yeah, you'll need a mic. I can hear him, but nobody else on the internet can hear you. We want everybody to hear.
Tobias, thank you very much. Appreciate the fact that you're a business person. From a business perspective, we're launching a project where we're working on a national series of a television show or some webisodes. It's about trying to bring America back and eventually the world. And I've said this at the last meeting, but we prize education. Other countries prize education as the path to a better life. Do you think that's true? And if so, if we pitch a television show, are investors going to pick up on that, grant writing and everything? They're going to say, wow, that is correct. That is the way to go. The Korean kids are being arrested at 10 o'clock at night. We mentioned that before because they're trying to take advanced placement courses. Are well-educated, I mean, Thomas Jefferson said for a democracy to survive, the masses would have to be well-educated. Is that true, and will people support that financially?
I would say globally, certainly in the so-called Western or civilized world, we are all guilty of underestimating or undervaluing education and also entrepreneurialism, because what we haven't really realized is that both are very closely interlinked. If you look at at least the countries that I know, that certainly includes the US and most European countries, already from a very early stage on, we develop children too little. There is still a mentality of I teach you, repeat after me, that we've now come to realize is wrong, because the first thing we should be doing with children in kindergarten is allow them to develop their own competence. If you have competence as a child, you are able to make good decisions or better decisions, and you can take more responsibility for your life. The old-fashioned repeat after me type teaching has gone out the window as we go forward. And I know that in for instance, in the US, there is a huge gap in educational capability, below and above the university level. So you have excellent universities that produce fabulously well-educated people, but below that, there isn't the same sort of standard that you'd probably have in Europe. And again, in these tough times, where we should be spending as nations, we should be spending more money on better education, starting right from early childhood through to all the university life. We're actually cutting back, and we're putting more money into military as opposed to making sure that our kids and grandkids are actually well educated to keep growing our economies. And that's really a sad fact that governments don't really do enough about, and I think we as people don't shout enough about. That's my view.
We have a follow-up, real quick, because we need to move on.
Quick follow-up. So is the message today, drop out of college like Zuckerberg and Gates and start up your own internet company and get rich quick. Don't mess around with formal education. I mean, we don't have an apprenticeship program anymore. So just forget about college. Just go ahead and make money. Is that what we're all about now? It's just show me the money.
That's certainly what it seems like, and that's a path to that's a sure path to poverty. Whilst I don't know where Facebook's going to go and whether it's actually ever going to make any money, you'd probably have to accept that Mark Zuckerberg is a very smart kid. After all, he was in Harvard, whereas that's not a good example for everybody else. It's particularly sad that you don't have apprenticeship programs any longer. That's something that, if you look at the German economy, the reason why that's so strong is partly because they actually have apprenticeship programs for people who don't have the intellectual capability to go to university, but who are going to become the engineers and the sort of low-level engineers who are building the cars that we all like and are so fond of because they are so well built and reliable. And that's something that's being lost everywhere else. So.
Well, I'm going to end it on. Oh, we have one more question. Let me hold on. What was the guy's name? He used to run around the audience all the time.
A comment. I would beg to defer on the intellectual capability because it's actually more, I think, not necessarily intellectual, just ability. So some people are more geared and have the intellectual ability to be an engineer. They don't have an arts and a liberal arts kind of. So I think, and that's part of our problem in the U.S. We make the trades the stepchild of other education, and if you can't go to a liberal arts, then you go into a trade. Whereas both should be goals for people, and there shouldn't be any ding on the intellectual capability for either path.
Yeah. I agree with you. I'm sorry if that came across wrong. I mean, I just meant, there are people who are better with their hands and other people who are better with their minds, and none of them are. None is better than the other. They should be the best they can be, and society has to value everybody. Where do you get a good shoemaker or a hat maker or a carpenter or a furniture maker these days? Because they're all busy starting internet startups. But we miss all of those trades and crafts, and that's again something that even though we're talking all about technology entrepreneurialism, that's something that's getting lost, and it makes us as nations much poorer.
The other thing is that I think we've changed some of the terminology. Apprenticeship now is internship. So some of the terminologies may have shifted as well. So there are some apprenticeship programs, and coming out of college, a lot of people, or coming out of high school, people not know what they want to do, but there are internships which are somewhat akin to apprenticeships, which will teach and guide and get a path, direction forward, so we can help people. Tobias, thank you so much. I appreciate your time this morning.
My pleasure. I'm sorry I couldn't talk much about Europe, which was what I was going to talk about.
Next time.
But it's such a fluffy issue that we don't know where it's going to go tomorrow.
But we're giving it a year, so hey.
Absolutely. Thanks for allowing me to talk, and best of luck to everybody.
We'll speak to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care.